Hi friends, welcome to another show, I Want to Know, the show dedicated to our government, people involved in our government, and how our government ticks. I'm interviewing candidates for this 2020 election cycle, and I'm pleased to have the Green Party candidate for the 3rd Congressional District, Justin Paglino, Dr. Justin Paglino. Thank you for joining me today. I really appreciate your time.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So the 3rd Congressional District covers New Haven County, part of Middlesex County, which would be Durham and Middlefield, correct? Mm-hmm. And some of Middletown, correct?
It's some 24 towns. It's really a lot, from Stratford, Orange, Derby, Prospect, up to, North Haven, Durham, North Branford, Guilford.
It's a really huge swath of Connecticut, 700,000+ residents.
Right, of whom about 400,000 are adults.
Adults, right?
Yeah.
So why don't we start off by introducing yourself? Why don't you tell everybody a little bit about you, your history, where you grew up?
Sure. Well, I'm originally from Shelton, Connecticut, and grew up there till about 4th grade. Have some nice memories there. We went to Cincinnati. We moved. My father used to work for Sikorsky, and then he got a job out in Cincinnati, and lived there through high school. Came back to the East Coast for college at Brown, and then medical school at Brown, and then I did 2 years of clinical pathology residency at Yale, and then I earned a PhD at Yale. Which took 5 years, studying viruses, virology, specifically oncolytic viruses that infect cancers.
Oh, okay.
And then I spent another 10 years doing that in a different lab with a different virus, but still an oncolytic virus. And I'm married and I have 2 children.
Okay. And you live in Guilford, correct?
Live in Guilford. Our children go to the Guilford Public Schools.
Okay, great. I mean, it's a great school district. We're very fortunate in the shoreline, especially Connecticut, but the shoreline, we have great school districts, and very good education.
Yeah, we've been very happy with it.
When you were growing up, did you focus on virology? What were your core interests in high school, and how did you get into that end of the medical
in high
area?
Yeah, I mean, in high school, I kind of generally had an ambition to try and do something to help address some problem. And in my mind, I guess the larger the problem I could try to address, the better. I don't know why.
Impact.
Yeah, I don't know why. I just felt kind of like I want to try and do something as big as I can. And probably, as a teenager, you tend to be a little bit ambitious, I guess. So I thought, I'm going to try and, cure cancer, something along those lines. But of course, it turns out to be very hard. But I had a great experience going through medical school, and I made some progress, and I had some successful papers in several journals.
Were your parents in the medical field as well?
No, my father was an aeronautical engineer.
Okay.
Worked for Sikorsky Aircraft. My mother had been a teacher, and then she was housewife, and she raised us. And after my father died, she volunteered at a theater. She was really into theater. She was an actress when she was young.
Wow.
So she did put in a lot of hours for local theater in Florida.
Wow, okay. So you're a doctor and you see what's going on in the world, the politics going on in the world, which I assume you focused on for years now, like a lot of us, myself included. What inspired you to first run for office, and what inspired you to first run for Congress?
Mm-hmm. Sure. Well, I've been following the national issues all my life. I was a big supporter of Bernie Sanders in 2016, and then again this cycle. And, I really admire what he did, which is he really stood up for some basic principles about the things everybody deserves. I really felt like he was standing up for everybody deserves a certain amount of dignity. They deserve, health care. It's inhumane that people are going without health care, and that's how I feel, especially when I know we can afford it. So there's a lot of issues that that I have opinions about and that I've thought a lot about. But that's one of the top ones for me, especially coming from a medical background, and that I've thought about perhaps the most. So, you know, I wanted to support Medicare for All in any way that I could, and I've joined an activist group in Connecticut, Medicare for All Connecticut, which I encourage people to look into. And I found they had done, one thing they had done was they had had a protest outside of Rosa DeLaura's office because she does not support Medicare for All. And I thought, well, you know, I wonder why. And I still don't really know why, but I just know that she doesn't. There's a bill in the House of Representatives, H.R. 1384, which is the Medicare for All bill. It's the counterpart to Bernie Sanders' Senate bill. It has 118 co-sponsors. It's been sitting there with 118 co-sponsors since February of 2019. But it hasn't been brought to the floor for a vote. And so it's just been sitting there. The party leadership has the power to bring things to the floor to a vote or not, and they just don't want to even have a vote on it. So I'm doing this to try and put pressure on the system. Rosa's not one of the co-sponsors, Ms. DeLauro, Representative DeLauro, and but I would be. So I also, along the same period of time, kind of came to believe that we don't have enough parties in this country, that two parties is not enough. Two parties creates divisiveness, creates a lot of problems.
What would be your evidence of that? No, I'm just kidding.
I think a lot of people are tired of having only two parties. But what I discovered that I didn't know, and a lot of people might not be familiar with, is that there's an easy solution. There's actually a very easy way that we can have get out of the two-party system. Because really we don't have a law against third parties.
Sure.
You can form a third party. You can be in a third party.
Well, there are third parties, right? Like the Green Party, for example.
And there's the Libertarian Party. There's lots of parties.
Right.
But because of the way we format our ballot, there's a certain dynamic. What we have is called plurality voting. And there's something called Duverger's law, which is just an academic term for this phenomenon that if you have plurality voting, if you only get to vote for one person on the ballot, over time the number of viable parties will winnow down to two. Because of the effect of, well, say you had 4 candidates or 5 candidates, it doesn't really work because, you know, you're just trying to edge out the other candidates. You could win with 30% of the vote if everybody else splits the remainder of the vote. And pretty soon everyone realizes, like, we have to narrow this down before the general election. And so that's really the mechanistic reason we have a two-party system. And the solution is called ranked choice voting, which I'm very excited about, and I love to spread the word about it because it really is all we need, I think, to make it so that third parties can be viable. They have it now in Maine. They're going to have a Senate race in Maine with 4 candidates, but you can rank your choices on the ballot. So if you like the Green Party candidate best, you can rank Lisa Savage first. If you like the Democrat second best, you could rank Sarah Gideon second, and so on.
I've heard of that, actually, yeah.
Yeah. I think it's catching on. I think more and more people are hearing about it. I think when people, in my experience, when I went out and talked to people about it, almost everybody says, oh yeah, I like that idea. Very rarely do I hear an objection because, again, people are happy to hear that there is a way out of the two-party system and that we don't have to live like this. We don't have to be constantly fighting. We don't have to live in a world where people who want to vote for the most progressive candidate have to feel shame or have to be castigated by
the party endorsed candidate, right? Like, I mean, is that what you're saying? Like, if you know my candidate, if I would want a much more progressive candidate than Joe Biden, right? Then you were saying you would vote for that progressive, your preferred candidate first, and then the choice goes down from there, correct?
Well, say you despise Donald Trump, and Joe Biden you feel is better than Donald Trump, but you still have some reservations about him, which is how I personally feel. I don't like his vote for the Iraq War, first and foremost. So, okay, but people say, all right, I understand where you're coming from, but you only have two choices. And then I say, well, I would like to have more choices. And they say, sorry, you can't.
That's not the way it is.
Yeah,
right.
and I say, well, maybe I'd like to vote for Howie Hawkins, who's more of a peace candidate than Joe Biden. And they say, no, people say, no, you can't do that, sorry. And no one likes to hear, no, you can't vote for the person you like the best. Because, growing up, I thought that's what elections were about. You look at all the candidates, you pick the one you like the best, and you vote for them. But our system's not like that. And it causes a lot of resentment, and justifiably so. I think the good news is there's a way out. It's called ranked choice voting. They have it in Maine. They're voting on it this November in Massachusetts. It's issue 2 on the ballot. And so I encourage people in Massachusetts to vote for that.
Okay. Wow. So that would restructure then how the ballots are even handled.
Yeah, so it's just a reformatting of the ballot. So now you could indicate your first choice candidate, and if you want, your second choice candidate, third choice candidate. That's all it is.
Right, okay.
And so then if on the first counting of ballots, someone doesn't get a majority, then if you voted for the candidate who came in last, your vote now goes to your second choice.
Right, that's fantastic.
Yeah, so
fascinating prospect right there.
Yeah, so you don't have to worry that your vote just disappeared.
It's not a wasted vote then.
Right.
Right. And that's always the fear is like, when Ross Perot ran, they're saying that or when any third party candidate is running. Ralph Nader, for example, right. Then you're just robbing another candidate of that vote, and that it doesn't have to be that way, as you're saying.
Yeah. And so, for example, history would have been different if we'd already had ranked choice voting. If we'd had ranked choice voting in Florida in 2000, there's a lot of Ralph Nader voters that year who maybe they wouldn't have put Al Gore as their second choice. But there's enough who would have that, there's a lot of Nader votes that would have gone to Al Gore. And it would have been President Al Gore.
Right.
And we'd have a nation maybe that had taken more serious action on global warming, for example.
War.
Yeah.
For example. Back to the Medicare for all issue, it's just interesting to me why, people's health care should be just tied to their employment.
Right, it shouldn't be.
Right, because we're all humans, correct? And you're not born without health care. 99% of us are born in hospitals with health care.
Yeah, and this year with the pandemic, over 5 million Americans lost their job because of the pandemic.
And then with their health care coverage.
And their health insurance along with it.
And then, if somebody does, get COVID, they're going to need health care to, get healthy from COVID. And plus there could be long-term consequences from COVID, lung issues, et cetera, et cetera. If you're not working, what do you do?
Yeah. And it
creates like that more the disparity between the haves and have-nots.
I understand, people wanting to have. People say, well, people need an incentive to work. Well, the incentive to work and to advance to a higher paying job should be because you get a higher salary, not because you get better health care. It should, health care is just a basic need that everyone. It's just basic dignity that we should be providing everyone with health care.
There's a lot of people that argue it's a human right, like clean water.
Yeah,
or clean air.
And I would agree with that. The way I phrase it is just to say it's something we can afford to provide for everyone. Not only can we afford it, it's actually less expensive than our current system. And there's been numerous studies. I have a link to an article on my website about this. Academics who've looked at the question of how expensive will Medicare for all be? Because that's the question, that you hear the moderators asking people on the stage, and how are you going to pay for it? Well, the fact is, it's less expensive, and it's because of efficiencies of scale and cutting out the profit motive.
Right.
Up to 15% less expensive. So yes, it would be a public expense instead of a private expense. But But instead of paying premiums or deductibles, and same thing for businesses, I think, wouldn't have to pay premiums, and individuals don't have to pay at the point of service co-pays or deductibles or premiums. All of that would be covered by a tax. So the average person would, I believe, be spending about the same or less money.
Or less, right.
And because we could pay for it with a sliding scale of progressive income tax.
Sure.
Which I think is fair, and I think most people recognize as fair.
Sure.
So I really think there's no excuse. And again, I have this, my slogan is, if you want something, you have to vote for it. If you vote for someone who says, I don't support Medicare for all, don't be surprised when you don't get Medicare for all.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what else do you expect? I mean, not to be patronizing about it, but I understand there's reasons, with this two-party system. This is what's so frustrating about the two-party system, is that you feel you only have two choices, and even if you want something different, you feel constrained and you can't vote for it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
The problem is, democracy is only responsive to the pressure that's applied at the ballot box.
Mm-hmm.
People need to show that they want something by voting for it. Otherwise, it just won't come to fruition, because the politicians know that they can get your vote. They can get your vote even without supporting that issue.
Right. How do you view campaigning? I mean, have you ever worked on a campaign before? You've never worked on a campaign for yourself before, but what has your experience been like?
Well, my first experience.
Welcome to one of your experiences of campaigning.
Yeah. Well, I've gotten to do some appearances like this, which is a pleasure, and my first experience was collecting petition signatures, because as a third-party candidate, to get on the ballot, I needed over 2,000 signatures. And the Green Party of Connecticut, like third parties everywhere, doesn't really have the same resources as the major parties in terms of money and manpower. So I did have some volunteers to help me, but almost half of the signatures I had to collect myself, because I'm the one who really wanted this the most. I had some very passionate, dedicated volunteers that I appreciate. So my experience was going out largely into parking lots, like Walmart parking lots, and just walking up to every stranger that I saw and saying, "Hi, I'm Justin Paglino. I'm running for Congress. I'd like to see Medicare for all. I'm trying to get on the ballot. Could you give me a signature? Are you a registered voter?" And most people would sign. It was, and some people would stop and talk, and I always enjoyed that too.
Sure.
Even though I knew I had to get on to collecting more signatures because there was time pressure, my fault was that I just enjoy talking about politics too much with anyone who wants to talk about politics.
Right.
I would get, sidelined. But people would talk to me about the struggles they've had and how they're getting squeezed and how they've had to do without medicines. I have a quote on my website, Martin Luther King, of all the injustices, inequality in healthcare is the most inhumane.
Right.
That's kind of a paraphrase, but it's basically that.
Sure.
And so I feel good when I talk to people that a lot of people are behind this issue. 80% of Democrats, 2/3 of Americans. I mean, I'm with a minority party, right? I'm with a minor party, but I feel my issues and my opinions are very popular, if mostly majority opinions.
Sure, if you ask somebody on the street, do you want to get rid of your health care? Would they say, yeah, I don't want health care? I mean, that's not an answer you're going to get. So people would say, yeah, I want health care and I want good quality health care that's not going to break me.
Yeah. And the arguments against that I hear, some people worry, well, is it still going to be high quality health care? And I say, well, yes, because it's going to be responsive to the pressures of democracy. So if everyone will get the same quality. So if we feel it's not adequate, we can do something about it. If you don't like your health insurance plan, you get what you get and you don't get upset, as they said in our children's preschool.
Right. Until my daughter used to say that until it applied to her. Then she didn't like that too much.
So, some people, so I think the quality is maintained, the cost is less, and I just think it's the humane thing to do it, and it's the logical thing to do. It doesn't, which is, I think the arguments for it are so strong, that's why it's gained such widespread acceptance. But unfortunately, like I said, our representative isn't one of the people who's been convinced yet. She has a plan called Medicare for America, and it's a plan that combines more of a public insurance program with private insurance. Kind of what we have now is a combination. I mean, many people are insured already by Medicare or Medicaid, which is public insurance. Or
the VA.
Or the VA, yeah. And her plan is to expand that to try and cover everyone so that everyone's, and that, is a step in the right direction, but I feel it doesn't really address the affordability issue because people will still be facing the issue of having to pay for some part of their health care in a lot of cases. And I think we just need to just pull the trigger and go and say, let's make health care free for everyone. They deserve it. We can afford it. Let's give it. And some people worry about, well, the health insurance industry. Okay, a lot of people work in that industry. I think there'll still be a lot of work for most of those people because we still need actuaries and accountants.
We need administration people that administer healthcare.
It still needs to be administered, but
right.
Some of the lavish CEO salaries would be a thing of the past.
Right. But okay. What political candidates and people serving in politics do you emulate? Do you want to emulate? Who do you most appreciate? Do you like Jimmy Carter? Or, give me some examples of politicians that you really appreciated in the past or currently.
Yeah, well, Bernie Sanders comes to mind first, just because he's been so inspiring and amazing to see, this fellow who he doesn't, I think even he would agree probably he doesn't have the charisma of a Barack Obama. He's not, necessarily a made-for-television politician, but it didn't matter because he just stood up for what he felt was right and articulated it clearly, and that was enough to resonate with people.
He moved the needle. He moved the public discussion towards those issues, right?
Yeah, and I think part of the reason he's so successful is that people could tell he's sincere.
Right.
Which is something I have, is sincerity. So I feel like that is an advantage. A lot of politicians don't have that. Again, telling you something you already know.
Yes, yes.
But I think, I'm hoping that voters can tell that I'm a sincere person, that I genuinely want, that I genuinely believe in the things I'm advocating for. And I know that there's so many people who feel the same. I felt like someone had to stand up. There's so many issues that are popular that needed a candidate just to stand up and say, okay, if you want to support these popular ideas, here I am. I'm a candidate who also supports them. And now you can go to the ballot box and show your support.
Mm-hmm. Sure. So you have, one of your issues is Medicare for all. What other issues are you passionate about?
Well, we've already talked about ranked choice voting.
Right.
There is a bill in the House that would support that nationally, that I would support. I think it's a very popular idea. If you get somebody on the national stage talking about it, it could become very popular very quickly. But another issue that I spend a lot of time thinking about, especially as with a science background, is climate change.
A science-based candidate.
Yeah, I have a science background. I have experience reading papers, writing papers,
looking at data, looking at the science behind different issues.
And also the essence of what science is trying to be objective. And so trying to look at things in a way that accounts for any biases that you yourself might have. That's what science is. So when it comes to climate change, I've looked at the science, and it just is so clear, that the people have been so rigorous about trying to understand the mechanisms behind that control our climate, that control the temperature. They've been very rigorous, and it all stands up to simple logic in the first place. I mean, we know that carbon dioxide traps heat. We know that without greenhouse gases, we would be a frozen, ice
Tundra.
Snowball.
Right.
It's the greenhouse gases that give us any heat at all. So more of them means more heat. I mean, it's just been frustrating to me to see this issue discussed and for
And politicized.
over 2 decades.
Like everything today is politicized, of course. Why does this have to be politicized as well? I mean, especially, we have, raging fires around the world, uncontrolled. We have, this is just, it's obvious. It's right there, and people's homes are burning. Look at Australia last year.
Oh, we were going to go to Australia, and then the fires broke out, and it was just, and then COVID came.
Right.
So all of that combined, we just said, maybe this isn't the year to go,
Right, to go anywhere.
to go to Australia.
Going to the grocery store is stressful enough, let alone getting on a plane.
Yeah, so we have seen tragic increase in fires and hurricanes, and there's
And melting ice caps.
There's a lot more sea level rise in the pipeline right now than a lot of people realize, and a lot closer. It's going to hit a lot closer to home, I think, than a lot of people realize.
Right, because 3 miles away we have the sound. Right, I mean it's going to affect us directly.
Yeah, and we're not just talking about a few inches of sea level rise. We're talking about feet. Maybe if we lose Greenland, we're talking 20 feet, and the Antarctica is maybe another 20 feet.
Right.
So imagine that. I mean, we're facing. We have to be prudent. We have to take this seriously. We can't continue to be reckless. We have to recognize that the responsible thing to do is to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, and we have technology that we can use. We have solar panels. We have wind turbines. I have an electric car. I can go to Brooklyn and back on a full charge.
Right.
We need to, whatever we have to do, we have to do it.
Okay, so I'm going to have to wrap up in a couple of minutes. Is there anything else you'd like to say to the voters before we wrap up? What would be your message?
Well, I would like to thank the voters for considering me, and invite them to visit my website at justinforall.org, and invite them to write me an email at info@justinforall.org. And my message is simply thank you for participating in the democratic process. I encourage everyone to do so, to learn about the candidates. Thank you for helping people to learn more about the candidates.
Sure.
This kind of service is important. And, because democracy is not a spectator sport, as they say.
Right.
We need everybody to participate.
Well, thank you very much for your time and your energy in doing this, and hoping to make this world a better place. I appreciate it, and it was really nice meeting you. My name is Dan Armin. Thank you for joining me in another episode of I Want to Know, and we'll see you again soon. Thank you.